Hello BookTube. Today for Tag Tuesday I'm going to be doing the W tag. This tag is the latest in the continuing alphabet tag series created by Jim of Jim's Books, Reading and Stuff. We're almost at the end. We'll see if there's one more tag or three more tags after this one. There's quite a few prompts, so let's get started. W is for werewolf. Have you read any books about werewolves? Initially, when I was thinking about my answer to this prompt, my answer would have been no. But then today I kind of realized that, yes, I've actually read a few things about werewolves. Although one thing in particular. Surprisingly, for somebody who loves fantasy as much as I do, werewolves really haven't played a whole lot of a role in that. They're not a classic monster that I read a whole lot of. But there is one story that I did read. Who Let the Dogs Out by Joe Phillips. It's a graphic short story in Phillips's collection of horror-themed gay erotic comics called Tales from the House of Moorcock, which I'm pretty sure is out of print. It's about our main character Jonas going on a date during the full moon, and his date turns out to be a werewolf, and you can guess how things progress from there. W is for witch. What is the last book you've read about a witch? I'm going to say a part of me wants to answer Magic, A History by Chris Gosden. Even though witches don't play a huge role in the book, surprisingly for History of Magic, one of the marquee practitioners of magic don't really appear as much. A bit towards the end, but Gosden is more interested in cultural aspects of magic, a more sort of frame of reference of magic rather than sort of actual practices a whole lot. Particularly, although he does touch on witchcraft in the medieval chapters and in more contemporary chapters, as well as the Greek and Roman parts of the Greek, Roman, and Jewish magic chapters, because, yeah, Greco-Roman magic was quite bad. So I think I'll go with Gather the Fortunes by Brian Camp. The character Regal is a magician. Some of her practices are quite akin to witchcraft, so we'll go with her. W is for wizard. Who is your favorite literary wizard? I think I would go with, I want to go with Natsu Dragno from Fairy Tale. He is a wizard who can control fire and uses this fire for a number of effects. Although the magic in Fairy Tale is more combat oriented. So Natsu's spells are more for fighting than for other applications. So I will also go with Namira from the short story The Dark Eidolon by Clark Ashton Smith, and Sathalanti from the short story The Scarlet Citadel by Robert E. Howard. So The Dark Eidolon is a revenge tale. The sorcerer Namira was, as a young boy, assaulted by at the time, the crown prince of a rather tyrannical empire. The young Namira flees into the desert, where he becomes the apprentice of a very powerful wizard and is taught magic, and Namira eventually makes his name as the premier dark wizard of his world. He then returns to his his home city and enacts his revenge on the now emperor of his country, and goes a little too far. In the Scarlet Citadel, Conan is captured by an alliance of enemy empires. At this point, he is king of Aquilonia, and he is lured into a trap and captured. The chief architect of this trap is the sorcerer Sotholanti, or wizard Sotholanti, who is the power behind the throne of the kingdom of Koth. And Sotholanti's place of power, the Scarlet Citadel, has a fantastic dungeon, and I just love that dungeon, so I'll go with them. W is for women, W is for women writers. What percentage of the books you read are written by women? I don't have exact numbers, even though I do log down the books I read and stuff. I don't really keep percentages. I aim for 50%, but it's probably in the 40% range, I would think. W is for war. What is your favorite book about World War I? The First World War by John Keegan. It's a history of the First World War, and it's the only history of World War I that I've actually read and own. I do want to pick up some more, though, eventually, and I do want to reread the First World War. War also refers to War, the third of the four children of the apocalypse, my two nieces and two nephews. When one of these alphabet tags touches on a letter that begins with the name of one of the four children, I would like death, famine, pestilence, and now war. I will usually take a break from Jim's prompts and tell a little story about one of the four children of the apocalypse. So in this case, let's talk about War. He was 6, and he wanted a computer. In his plan of campaign, he was remarkably consistent. He kept his eyes on the goal. He is now 7, and he has that computer. And it's so cute, him playing on it. Which I know it's probably, on one hand, a bad thing that my brother did get him a computer for his birthday, because I mean he is 7. But at the same time, he's pretty much like his sister Famine. They're completely addicted to their devices. But anyway, yeah, so next prompt. W is for Washington, White House, and worst. Would you consider James Buchanan to be the worst U.S. president? There are a number of candidates for this. So the 4 candidates I have for the worst president ever are obviously James Buchanan, Richard Nixon, George W. Bush, and Donald Trump. Now, James Buchanan, during his presidency, completely appeased the slave power, the southern states. With Lincoln's victory, Buchanan aided and abetted the South's secession. Without any legal challenge, he just let them go. And I want to say he was rather sympathetic to the Confederacy in the Civil War. which is pretty damning. Nixon got caught playing dirty politics. He had his goons, his henchmen, burgle the Democratic National Headquarters at the Watergate Hotel, which is why it's Watergate. He was also, earlier in his career, a master of dirty politics. His rise to the Senate in the late 40s is an example of that. Before he was elevated to Eisenhower's vice president. George W. Bush, obviously, under his watch, the United States became more authoritarian, more of a surveillance state, and also the Iraq War. And then, of course, Donald Trump tried to turn the United States into an authoritarian dictatorship, and only stopped because of his own incompetence, was an incompetent president in general. His refugee policy was atrocious. I mean, children in cages. His handling of the coronavirus pandemic, horrid. So, of these four candidates, who's the worst? While, I mean, obviously, there's some caveat with Bush and Trump that they're more recent. So, the visceralness of my reaction, of the reaction to them, is more immediate. But at the same time, I do think Donald Trump is the worst president, with Buchanan coming in second, Bush coming in third, and Nixon being fourth. I think that would be my ranking of the worst presidents. Okay, moving on to W is for Warhol. Warhol said, "Art is whatever you can get away with." Would you consider Away from the Flock, 1994, by Damien Hirst, or My Bed, 1999, by Tracey Emin to be art? Yes. Art is human creative endeavor with the purpose of entertainment, decoration, commentary, or confrontation. While I have looked at both pieces of work, I've looked at both Away from the Flock and My Bed, and while I don't find either one aesthetically pleasing, in fact, I find Away from the Flock rather disgusting, and if I were to actually see the piece on display in a museum, which is where most of this type of art is best served, best shown, I would probably be making a beeline to the bathroom to vomit. But just because I don't like the piece does not mean it's not art. So yes, both pieces are art. W is for wood. The log cabin prompt returns. You are in a log cabin with no internet and no Kindle. There are 6 books in the cabin. Oh. Okay, so the 6 books are, I forgot there were 6, I thought there were 5. So the 6 books are Meridian by Alice Walker, The Bonfire, the Vanities by Tom Wolfe, The Time Machine by H.G. Wells, Maisie Dobbs by Jacqueline Winspear, The Chrysalids by John Wyndham, Fingersmith by Sarah Waters. Which of these books would you read first? Which would you leave to last? You may also rank the books if you so wish. So, normally I prefer to deal with the books I'm least interested in first, so I can get them out of the way and save the best for last, or at least what I hope to be the the best for last. Now, these are all fiction, and I've had horrible luck with fiction the last few years, so there's a good chance if I were in this scenario, I would end up bailing on all of them. But I will rank them from the ones that I'm most interested in first to the one I'm least interested in last. So I don't know any of these books. I know of some of the authors. So I've read H.G. Wells before, War of the Worlds, when I was 12, and I remember quite liking it, although it didn't exactly wow me. And then I've read The Color Purple by Alice Walker, which I quite enjoyed. And I've heard of Tom Wolfe and John Wyndham, but I haven't heard of Jacqueline Winspear and Sarah Waters. So the book that I find most interesting is The Bonfire or the Vanities by Tom Wolfe. So that would be my number one. I didn't read the entire plot synopsis because it's pretty much the complete plot synopsis is on Wikipedia. But from a quick overview, I think it sounds very interesting. Number two would be Meridian by Alice Walker. I'm not entirely sure. I mean, it's not necessarily a ringing endorsement, but I think it sounds quite interesting. Next up would be The Time Machine by H.G. Wells. And then The Chrysalids by John Wyndham, which I don't really know a whole lot about The Chrysalids because that's the one that I completely forgot was in this prompt. Rounding out the final two, Fingersmith by Sarah Waters, which sounds interesting if a little melodramatic for me. And then finally, Macy Dobbs by Jacqueline Winspear, which I found to be completely uninteresting. I read the plot synopsis and I'm like, nope. W is for Wales. Have you ever been to Wales? Unfortunately, no, I've never left the continental United States, much to my chagrin. W is for Wuhan. Have you read a book about a pandemic, real or fictitious? I don't think so. Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf? Are there any books or writers which intimidate you? Not really. I don't think I'm intimidated by any book or author. It might take me a while to get to them eventually. Although I do love the play Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. It is a fantastic play. Also movie too. W is for We, the Drowned. Have you read any books using the first person plural we for much of the narration? No. W is for Word Games. Do you have a favorite word game? No. W is for Writing. Have you written any books? No. The furthest I've ever gotten in my writing has been essays or papers for class and short stories, novellas. I did have a kind of sort of successful NaNoWriMo one year, but I ended up finishing the story about 25,000 words in, not the complete 50,000 words. Anyway, and I guess while I'm here, a bit about NaNoWriMo. I mentioned earlier that I had a science fiction project that I was working on that I wasn't satisfied with, so I dropped it. And then I moved on to a more realistic story, which sort of captured my interest, but I don't know exactly how to handle that. I think I'm too much of a science fiction, more fantasy writer, so I'm not entirely sure how to make the story work without wizards throwing fireballs at each other. So I might end up dropping that one or trying to cycle that into something. I don't know what though. Now we do the bonus prompts. W is for Wa. Do you prefer Evelyn or Oberon? I'd have to say Evelyn because I have no idea who Oberon Wa is. W is for Wikipedia. Do you use this as your principal source of reference? I use it as a initial source of reference, but I much prefer reading more dedicated works than Wikipedia, which does kind of slow down some of the research, I think. W is for World Wide Web. Do you have a favorite website? Not really. I mean, I have a bunch. So the sites I most frequent are obviously YouTube, also Amazon, my Yahoo email, and then I also have on my computer, I have Alibris, Book People. It's the big independent bookstore in Austin, Texas. A Book Depository, Fabled Bookshop, and I think it's Cafe, which is a independent bookstore in Waco, even though I never look at it and haven't shopped with them in like a year. Powell's, the storied independent bookstore in Portland, Oregon, and Netflix for some reason. Even though I never actually use Netflix on my computer, I usually use it on my tablet. So those are some of my favorite websites, but I do have quite a few. Some of which it might not be politic to talk about. I mean, I already mentioned Joe Phillips and the House of Moorcock, so one scandalous bit would be enough for this tag. Although something tells me it might show up in the X tag. W is for Weir. Have you read The Martian and or Hail Mary by Andy Weir? No. Although, if we're talking about Weir as a surname for authors, I do want to get some cookbooks by Joanne Weir eventually. Joanne Weir is a cooking show host. I don't know if she's doing any new shows, because I know I watched some of her shows in the early 2010s, like late 2000s, early 2010s, but I think she's kind of not producing anything anymore. Although that could be depending on the PBS station, because they can be weird, and I haven't had PBS in like almost 5 years now. Disappointing intensely. W is for World. Do you have a favorite book about the circumnavigation of the world? No, I don't actually have any books on that. Very few books on exploration in general, which is, I think, one subject I do need to correct for. Anyway, so as I end this prompt and we get to the tagging, who do I tag? I tag everybody. So if you haven't done this tag and you would love to do this tag, please consider doing it. I will be back tomorrow with the end of the year tag, and then I'll try to find another tag for Thursday. I just don't know exactly what tag that will be. I know Steve's Books and Life tag is making a comeback, but I've already done that tag a few months ago, so I think it's a little too early to rehash that tag. So we shall see, and of course Friday will be my October book haul and weekly read. So until then, BookTube, thank you, have a great afternoon, and stay safe.